is the Big Stories Podcast, where we tell the amazing and inspiring stories from across the Big 12 Conference.
Welcome into another edition of the Big Stories Podcast, where we tell the biggest and best tales in the Big 12 Conference. Let's dive in.
The Big Stories' 5 biggest storylines. Number 5.
After back-to-back losses, the Iowa State Cyclones seem to be spinning in the right direction. ISU hammered UCF at home by 30 and led by 20 at Oklahoma State before leaving Stillwater victorious 84-71. Maybe returning home after losing at Cincinnati and Kansas helped out a bit, but it also helps when they don't rely on just a few guys to score buckets. After the entire team shot terribly against Kansas, only a few of those guys bounced back in their loss to Cincinnati. Joshua Jefferson scored 16, but didn't shoot well. And then there's Milan Momcilovic. Against the Bearcats, he scored almost half of the Cyclones' 70 points. In the most recent 2 wins, the scoring is evened out a bit. Even though Milan is on a heater, he's averaged close to 28 points a game in the last 3 contests and shot over 50% in those games, including 67% against the OSU Cowboys.
Number 4.
Coming into this week's games, Milan Momcilovic was only the 8th leading scorer in the Big 12. He could still move up with about 11 games left in the season, but it could be difficult catching the top 4. At number 4 and number 3 are JT Toppin from Texas Tech and Terrence Brown from Utah. Both are scoring around 22 points a game. As of Monday, Brown had made 113 free throws compared to Toppin's 46. Then again, Toppin has made 182 field goals. 10 of those are threes. That'll happen when you have a big guy in the mix. The Big 12's top 2 scorers are PJ Haggerty from Kansas State and AJ Dybantsa. On Monday, Haggerty was averaging 23.4 points a game, while Dybantsa was scoring 23.2 points. Scoring 43 points against the Utes helped Dybantsa's cause. Who will win the league's scoring title? I would probably favor Haggerty, since the Texas native has 339 field goal attempts, which is double that of any of his teammates on Kansas State's roster. He's also doubled up everyone else on his team in field goal makes.
Number 3.
Oh, those fabulous freshmen. You would think that the upper echelon teams in the Big 12 would be led by a bunch of veteran leaders, and they are, but some of those dynamic players are a bunch of freshman phenoms. Arizona's Peat and Braden Burries are averaging a combined 29 points a game for the number 1 team in the nation. Houston's Kingston Flemings is averaging close to 18 points a game, and fellow Cougar freshman Chris Sunak Jr. is in the starting lineup. So I asked Houston Chronicle beat writer Joseph Duarte to tell us about their games for those of us who haven't watched the Cougs this season.
Kelvin Sampson will tell you he never wants to do this again in terms of having 2 starters that are freshmen in his lineup. But, it has been different for them. You throw in Milos Uzan, you got the Emmanuel Sharp, Joseph Tugler, like we talked about. But I think there was a lot that was expected, but maybe it's been a little flip-flop. A lot of people thought Chris Sunak would be the one that would sort of be the top freshman of the group, but it's been Kingston Flemings. And to have a freshman caliber guy like that who's essentially running the offense, or allows them to do like a double point guard on the court at the same time with Uzan, it's been big. I mean, this is a talented freshman that I've seen him, anywhere from 5 to 8 or 9 on the NBA mock drafts. That puts him in the lottery, and chance that he's one and done, which I don't think very many people thought that would be the case this year. But, I mean, he's tremendous talent, fearless. He took over the Texas Tech game earlier in the year and scored 9 points down the stretch in that big win. And, he's just got another gear to him. He sees things differently. He's good with the ball. He doesn't make mistakes. That's just been a bonus for them. And then you talk about Sunak. He's the 6'11" guy who played center his entire high school career, but he's sort of transitioned, or at least wanted to play that 4 spot this year. And that's where the adjustment's been. He's got the ability to spread out and get to the perimeter and take threes. But what they've worked with him the most on is, he's a guy that hasn't had to defend. And if you play in Kelvin Sampson's system, you have to defend. So here now you have a 6'11" guy who goes out and maybe guards a guard on the perimeter, and he's having to learn just the intricacies of that and being up to par what Kelvin Sampson demands. So both of them have been tremendous this year. And then you throw in, Isaiah Harwell, who's from the Utah area, where, he was slowed by an injury, kind of derailed his off season, but he's now emerged as probably their top one or two guys off the bench, and he can really stroke it from outside. So they were the number 2 signing class last year, and 2 of them have played key and central roles in Houston's good start to the year.
Thanks, Joseph. Now moving on, you have BYU's AJ Dybantsa, who could be the number 1 overall pick in the upcoming NBA draft. He scored 43 against Utah, recording a new scoring record for a freshman at the school. I asked BYU Sports Nation's and BYUradio sports host Jason Shepher about the AJ experience.
We had all of these expectations. You hear that BYU's getting the number 1 recruit in college basketball, and you have all these ideas of he's going to be the number 1 or definitely a top 3 pick. But what if it doesn't work out? Well, it has worked out. And not only has it met expectations, AJ Dybantsa has exceeded expectations. And that is a credit to him, because he is by far the guy that's on the scouting report every single game for BYU's opponents. They are going out to stop AJ Dybantsa to make sure he doesn't beat them, and game in and game out, he is able to do whatever he wants. His ability to get in the paint and pull up for that jump shot, which is unguardable, has proven to be huge. But that to me is what has really stood out with AJ, is he knew about the expectations. He owns the expectation and has exceeded all expectations so far.
Thanks, Jason. I just wish we could see more of Kansas Frosh, Darren Peterson.
Number 2.
Peterson's Jayhawks moved up 5 spots in this week's top 25 poll after 4 straight wins, and now they sit at number 14. The other big mover was Houston, who moved down 4 spots after losing to Texas Tech, which moved up to number 11. Meanwhile, BYU is sitting at lucky number 13 with a chance to make a move up in next week's poll. Before the Cougars took on number 1 Arizona on Monday night, I talked to Jason Shepher about the guys who've impressed him outside of the big 3 of AJ, Rob Wright, and Richie Saunders.
This team, whether BYU gets bench production or not, is still going to go as far as the big 3 will take them. The 3 that you mentioned, AJ, Rob, and Richie. They're going to go as far as those 3 players will take them. But they do need some bench help, and it hasn't helped that Nate Pickens wasn't available this year because of injury, and then Dawson Baker gets hurt. So you're losing some of these other pieces. I think a guy like Keba Keita has really helped because of his ability to play around the basket, and it's obviously defensively with his ability to rebound and block shots. He's a menace, and nobody wants to bring the ball near the hoop because he's around. But even on the offensive side, offensive rebounds and putbacks, he's able to do those types of things. I think Moo Davis has a real opportunity. I know he's not shooting the ball great right now, but his ability to play, we saw it in the beginning of the season. He can be such a key contributor to this team down the stretch, and BYU's going to need Moo as this season progresses. I think a guy like Mihailo Boskovic comes up with big shots. He may not have huge stat lines, but it seems like he comes up in these big games with a big shot or 2 at critical times. And the other guy I'll mention is Hadim Boop. Hadim Boop is a guy that when he comes on the floor, it is instant energy, and he can bring a lot of different things. His number 1 calling card is defense. He's such a really good defender, and they will play him at all 5 spots. So he can guard a 1. They'll put him on the opposition's best player. So you've got that, but he'll dive on the floor for a loose ball. He can get an offensive rebound and work around the basket. So I think Hadim is one of those guys that with more minutes and more consistent playing time, I think he could really be a key moving forward.
Number 1.
Can anyone stop Arizona? Again, I'm recording the majority of this episode before the Wildcats played in Provo, Utah against the BYU Cougars. When I talked with Jason Shepher about what it would take for the Cougars to beat the Cats, he said,
I think BYU starting 5 can go toe-to-toe 100%. But when you look at what Arizona brings, they've got 5 players all in double figures. They've got a high draft pick in Peat as well. What's interesting about them is they're a little bit different from a lot of teams. The college game and basketball in general has gone to the perimeter, and it's all about shooting threes. And it's not that Arizona can't shoot threes or doesn't shoot threes, but it is not. They don't rely on it like a lot of other teams. They would do all of their hard work down in the paint. And so BYU is going to have to make sure that they are tough around the basket in the paint, because that's where Arizona wants to live.
The Tucson Cats have dominated in conference play. Only rival Arizona State has been within single digits at the end of the game. I know that's an unfair metric, but it still shows how dominant they've been this season. It's going to be fun to see how their season progresses, especially because the schedule is getting tougher and tougher. After the game against BYU, they're at ASU, at Kansas, home to Texas Tech, home to BYU, at Houston, home to Kansas, and then home against Iowa State. There are a few other games in there too. Speaking of their game against the BYU Cougars, the Wildcats remained unbeaten after surviving a scare at the Marriott Center. They were up 11 with just over a minute left in the game and almost gave it all back. BYU had a chance to take the lead with under 11 seconds, but a fabulous freshman we didn't talk about in this episode, Braden Burries, blocked Rob Wright's shot and hit 2 free throws to seal the Cats' victory. Burries scored 29 points in the game, including 13 of 14 from the foul line. Big shout out to him. Now on with the show. All right, we're back in the past again before the Arizona BYU basketball game, and it's story time. We're wrapping up each Big 12 team's football season, and this week we're talking about Houston and BYU. I would say that both teams surprised everyone. BYU ended up in the Big 12 title game after losing their starting quarterback, and Houston went from a 4-win season to 10 wins thanks to the wizardry of Willie Fritz. I asked Houston Chronicle beat reporter Joseph Duarte how Willie willed the red-clad Cougars to new heights.
This has sort of been his MO everywhere he's gone. Within year 2, there's this big turnaround, and like clockwork, it sort of just came together this year. They were coming off back-to-back 4 and 8 seasons, one of them under Dana Holgerson, and then just like a lot of schools these days, they went into the portal, filled some needs, and most of it was on the offensive side, given that they were one of the worst in 2024, and it just clicked. So, between having a defense that was really, really good this year and an offense that was, averaging twice what it did the year before, it added up. And, did I think going into the year they were 10 wins? No. I had them pegged at probably 7 was the ceiling, going to a bowl game, but certainly not winning 10 and then beating, an LSU in the game in the Texas Bowl to end the season.
So many quarterbacks have entered the transfer portal, for better paydays or maybe different opportunities with bigger name teams. So how big of a deal is it that Cougs QB Connor Wegman returns for another season?
Oh, it's absolutely huge for several reasons. One, everybody knows, it's well documented his 3 years at A&M. It was, he underperformed. It was injuries. He ended up losing his job. And last year, Houston, given that it's his hometown, he was able to hit that reset button and just kind of a fresh start was exactly what he needed. He got going. He was healthy the whole year, threw for 2,700 yards combined for 36 touchdowns, showed that running that he really didn't get to do at A&M because he was always hurt. And for him to immediately during the bowl prep say, I'm coming back, that was a huge step for them because this is a Houston program that in 2 years prior, the year before with Willie Fritz's first year, he was having to alternate quarterback. They could not solve the position, and that's why the offense struggled as bad. So now there's some continuity, and he can serve as a mentor because they just brought in the number 1 quarterback prospect in the country, Keyshawn Henderson. So there's that bridge now where Henderson can learn from Wigman. Houston has a bona fide veteran quarterback, and it really sets up a nice transition for 2027.
So we know the quarterback's coming back, which is great news. What does Coach Fritz, what else does he need to do, whether it's in the transfer portal or just schematics or anything like that? What does he need to do to keep the Cougs going in the right direction?
Well, they need to get bigger, and that was one of the lessons, if you want to call it, that they said that they learned going through year 2 in the Big 12. They had a roster that just wasn't up to size in terms of the teams that they were facing. A lot of teams were just bigger and stronger. So that was sort of an emphasis, and it will continue to be one. I don't think it's one that just gets solved in one portal cycle. So, that's there. They've surrounded Wigman with some playmakers, going out and getting Mekhi Hughes, who was previously at Tulane before he was at Oregon and was a 1,000-yard rusher. That fills one big spot. They go out and they get 3 guys on the offensive line who should come in and start. And then keeping Amari Thomas, that next to Wigman, that was the biggest move of the offseason. He was near 1,000-yard receiver. So you look good there on the offensive side. I think ultimately getting a guy like Ashton Porter as an edge rusher, he was at Oregon last year, that will help some. But I think they still want to fill that interior D-line, maybe some linebacker spots. But for what they did and who they got, I think they were 6th nationally in some of the portal rankings. That's pretty good if you're Houston, because you're not working with the same dollars that a school like, for say, Texas Tech or Texas is working with. So they really went out and did the shopping the right way, and they filled some holes that needed to be filled this offseason.
BYU has also been filling needs during this offseason, but I think fans around Provo are still reveling in their 12-2 season, even if they did get shunned by the College Football Playoff Committee. I talked to BYU Sports Nation's Jason Shepard about the 2025 campaign after many thought they'd be lucky to win 5, 6, or even 7 games.
I think it was absolutely a successful season. And quite frankly, I mean, I don't want to rehash, bad feelings for everybody, but in my opinion, BYU did everything that was necessary for them to be a college football playoff team. They did, in my opinion. Now, you can say it's biased, that's fine. But in my opinion, BYU, before they even played in the Big 12 championship game, had already done enough to deserve a college football playoff spot. We obviously know it didn't happen, but to get that out of my system and then answer your question, the thing that probably impressed me the most was going into last year, expectations were high, and then everything sort of fell apart from an expectation standpoint when Jake Retzloff left and you didn't know who the quarterback was. And then you find out that BYU's transfer quarterback from Stanford, this true freshman in Bear Bachmeier, who I know the coaching staff felt very highly about, comes in and, number one, plays every game, and number 2, leads this team ultimately to a 12-2 season as a true freshman. It went from the highest of expectations after the previous year to, wait a minute, we don't know who the quarterback's going to be, to a true freshman doing what he did, leading this offense to unbelievable heights. So that's the first thing that really comes to mind for me. Secondly, and this actually is after the season, the thing that has impressed me the most was how many players BYU kept. They only lost a couple of players. In fact, they did not lose a starting player to the portal. Now, obviously, they lost some coaches, and certainly you lost your defensive coordinator in Jay Hill. But for BYU to come in and right out of the gate, when other teams across the country within the state of Utah are losing players left and right to other programs, BYU was sending out social media posts about running it back. And the 2 biggest that came back, Bear Bachmeier, who I just mentioned, and then Falatau Satawala, the safety. Both those guys stepped in right away and said they're coming back. But then, you've got Parker Kingston say he's coming back, and Isaiah Glasker coming back, and Evan Johnson coming back. The fact that BYU was able to retain all of the players that they did and really didn't lose anybody that really impressed me, especially in today's landscape.
It was impressive that they were able to keep all of their starters. I think the thing that makes me wonder, and maybe because I'm always thinking negatively, Jason. No, I'm just kidding on that. But I think this is awesome that they're keeping all their players, but are they going to improve? Am I off base on that? Because I think it's good that they kept their players, but we can see that if they just do like they did last season, they're going to come up short. Or there's the possibility that they could come up short. So am I off base when I say that it's just like we now have to see a little bit of improvement from some of these guys? And we could talk about Bear maybe improving a little bit better so that the offense flows and runs a little bit better. We could talk about many things, but am I off base when I think that?
No, I mean, I don't think you're off base. I think every year, regardless of what you did the previous season, you always have to sort of reprove yourself, right? Because every year is sort of its own ecosystem. And then when that season's done, and how many times you've been around sports long enough, coaches say, hey, what we did last year doesn't matter now. It's all about what we're going to do now. So I understand where you're coming from. But I think especially when you talk about guys as young as Bear, there is a natural progression that now you've gone through a season, you expect them to be better. And look, maybe the record isn't the same, but you can be maybe we see Bear actually being a better quarterback in a year or two. I think we all expect that. But the end result in some of these games may not be the exact same. That doesn't mean that Bear didn't take a step forward. But you've got a guy like Parker Kingston, who I mentioned, that's going to move into, one of the go-to guys. He already was last year, but with Chase Roberts now gone, Parker Kingston's one of those guys that immediately you look at as the go-to receiver right now. We saw what this team was able to do with a pass-catching tight end in Carson Ryan. Now you bring in Walker Lyons, from USC, you bring in a couple of other guys. There are areas, as well as things went for this team last year on both sides of the football, BYU's still bringing guys in to add to the continuity. And I know that sounds a little, backwards. If it's continuity, you're not adding or changing things, but you've got such a strong core and the bulk of the team is back. Being able to add select players to fill select needs, I think, is a big deal, and where BYU can maybe make that jump.
BYU defensive coordinator Jay Hill did enter the transfer portal, now coaching at Michigan. New defensive coordinator Kelly Papinga has been defensive coordinator before at a previous job, but this is his first time as play caller. What are you expecting from him this next season? I know he's kind of addressed some of that, but what do you expect from him coming into this next season?
Yeah, a little bit of it is unknown, but as you said, he's had those responsibilities before. I think that you will see a pretty similar defense from a schematic standpoint to what we saw last year. I think you've heard Kalani talk about how the defense is where he wanted to be from a scheme standpoint. Him working with Jay Hill and then Jay Hill with all of the position coaches, it was one big collaboration. Now, certainly Jay and Kalani were very familiar with that system because it's stuff that they ran when they were at the University of Utah. But I think, Kelly being able to be around Jay for the last couple of seasons, being able to understand exactly what that system looks like. And you've still got some position coaches that were part of that at Utah. So, and then let's not forget Gary Anderson here as an analyst, as just kind of helping out where it needs to be. That's like having Jay Hill. He and Jay Hill were kind of like one and the same in terms of their knowledge of this system. So, again, I think it will still be a collaborative effort, but I think the plan is for them to try and continue to do the things that they've done the last couple of years that's been so successful. So I'm curious, like you are, to see how it all plays out. But when you have the same personnel coming back and already what they can do, and the system does work, I'm not sure why you would want to make wholesale changes to it.
BYU's been pretty intentional about getting the guys. You mentioned Walker Lyons, getting the right guys to fill in here with this team in 2026. What position do you think they're still missing, that, or what kind of a guy are they still looking for that could come in from the transfer portal and help them out next season?
I think that one of the biggest ones, and I'm going to pull this. The reason I know this is the answer is because Coach Papinga actually said it. He mentioned we probably need to address corners still. So I still expect them to go out and probably look at that position specifically. I would not have a problem if they did go out and bring in for a depth type of situation, another receiver, possibly another running back. I don't know if it's necessary. Like specifically, Coach Papinga mentioned cornerbacks. But if there's an area where you feel like you can add some depth, I don't think it's a bad thing because, look, injuries are a part of this, and you never know who's going to get hurt, and you never know who has the opportunity to step up. And so cornerback for sure, because I know that was one position specifically mentioned. But, yeah, some of those other ones, if you can go find a depth piece at offensive line, go for it. You know what I mean? Like if that stuff's available and you think that it can help this team through a couple of different scenarios if they were to play out during the year, go for it.
A big thanks to BYU Sports Nation and BYU Radio host Jason Shepher and the Houston Chronicle's Joseph Duarte. Coming up on Thursday's episode, we tell the story of former Houston Cougar Flo Hyman, who was enshrined in the U.S. Olympic Hall of Fame in 2025. But who is Flo? Why is one woman trying to keep her memory alive? That's all coming up on this Thursday's episode of the Big Stories podcast. So make sure you subscribe to not miss an episode. Until then, I'm your host, Cleon Wall. Big Stories is a production of BYU Radio.